Welcome to the studio at That Nerd Show. I'm Marcus Blake, and joined with me is Alex Moore.
Mellow greetings.
And this is another episode, part of our interview series. We are interviewing the wonderful Jenni Tooley. Say hi.
Hi, everybody. It's so good to see everybody today.
I know, right? It's like, yay, we get to see people.
I'm not just talking to my cats. I was afraid I was going to get on here today and be like speaking in cat language for the first 10 minutes, but it seems like you're understanding me, so it's okay.
Right. Well, the audio has been the least of our worries and the technical difficulties we've been dealing with today. Thank you, Skynet. We are well aware that you're out there. Just another prime example of how interesting this year has been. But with the power of Zoom, we are able to do interviews and still interview wonderful filmmakers, talk about what they're doing. Also in conjunction with the Women's Texas Film Festival that is doing a virtual film festival this weekend. We realize this isn't as much fun as being on the red carpet, and that's okay. We still get to talk about film, but we also get to ask you questions that we didn't have time to ask you last year. So
Great,
there we go.
Great. And I get to wear flip-flops instead of heels, so that's amazing. Like, that's great.
Flip-flops, you don't even have to wear pants for these interviews. That's what makes it. Anyway, so first of all, how have you been doing? It's like I said, it's been a very interesting year, the past few months. It seems like you've been doing a lot creative-wise, but how are you surviving the pandemic?
Yeah, I'm an introvert, so surviving the sheltering at home has not been that big of an issue for me. It's actually been kind of a relief. I'm like, oh, thank God I don't have to go out into groups of people. I'm getting re-energized, and but it's a lot to handle. It's a lot to, as a sensitive person, I think a lot of us creatives are very sensitive, and whether or not we're around all the craziness or whatever's going on, it still affects us pretty deeply. So I've been having to find some ways to manage that. I don't do a lot of Facebook. I don't watch a lot of news. It's just too overwhelming.
Yes.
So I'm just kind of hanging out with my cats and myself. And it's been kind of a really good time to get to know me better and start to know what voices are in my head talking to me and what they're talking about.
Are you?
I don't have a lot of other people's voices in my head right now. It's mostly me.
It sounds like you're teasing this multiple personality character-driven story.
Well, maybe. I've noticed, there are a lot of things in our thinking and our beliefs that drive us that sometimes we don't even know about until it gets really, really quiet. So now I'm able to hear a lot more of them and deal with them a little bit better than I used to.
Right. Well, we were speaking with another filmmaker earlier, Tracy Lehman, who has a film at the Women's Texas Film Festival. We were talking about how creative types are handling the pandemic. Mm-hmm. And like you said, if you're an introvert or you like, kind of being away from groups of people, this is the perfect time to get writing done. I'm anxious to see the future projects that are going to come out of people being able to get a lot of writing done.
It is and it isn't. I thought I was going to get so much done. I lost my one of my jobs. And so I had a lot of time on my hands, and I'm like, oh, this novel that's in my head and this self-help book that's in my head and my next feature project, I'm just going to, and that's not happening. And I think that's happening with a lot of creatives out there, and people are beating themselves up. Why am I not writing my novel? And it occurred to me the other day that it's part of it is we have to be incredibly creative just to get through the day right now.
Right.
Everything is different. So just going to the grocery store, how do I do the grocery store? Or, how do I have this conversation with you today?
Right.
So I think a lot of the creativity for me is going there instead of over here where I want to be writing new projects. But I do also think you're right. A lot of people have been able to latch onto it, and there's a lot of, it's going to be interesting to see what comes out of it. A lot of people are working.
I want to be more like those people because I can't get any writing done either. So.
Well, it's funny.
Why,
Go ahead, Jenny. Go ahead.
and that's why I was banging my head against the wall a little bit. That's why I created the virtual retreat I'm doing next weekend. Is because I know a lot of people aren't. It's really hard to focus if you're in your house with your people or your animals, or you're working in the same place that you're trying to create. You're not around people and collaborating. So that's why I put together a virtual retreat to kind of create a space for us all to work together in while we can work apart as well. And we can have some social time and some fun and commit to a creative bubble of sorts. So yeah, it's interesting right now.
Well, it's kind of funny. There's always movies that are popping up on cable or whatever, and I rewatched About a Boy not too long ago, and where he talks about the beginning of the film about how to have little blocks of time in your day, and I never really truly appreciated that until now. Between there's not as much work, and you take an hour to get some writing down, you do something else or whatever, and this is how you break up your day, so you feel like you feel like you're getting stuff accomplished. And if it does take you 15 minutes to put pants on, that's a block of your day.
They may have carefully disheveled 3 units.
Right. So yeah, I wanted to ask you about the virtual retreat, and thanks for the invite. So tell us did this just come out of not being able to really see people in person and stuff? I mean, tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, it was just kind of an inspiration that popped into my head. The first thing I did during the pandemic was I did script readings online. I had 2 scripts that were sitting there, and I was like, I've always wanted to have these read. Let's try it on Zoom. So, I got 18 people in a gallery setting trying to read feature film scripts. And that was interesting. And then I said, okay, well, how do we do this OBS or Ecamm stuff? Like, how do we broadcast things live? So I did a talk back with Jenny McGuire for Stuck. And then I started watching what other people were doing. And I went to this event with like 3,000 people. And it was this card reading medium who she would like point to people on screens, and she'd be like, I want to talk to that person. And they would like eventually find that person and bring them up with a big screen behind her. It was pretty amazing. And I thought, I can't go anywhere right now. I can't get away. What can I do? So I just started taking all those ideas and combining them into a virtual retreat. So, we're going to have some fun. We're going to do a campfire Friday night. Campfire.
I'm waiting for someone to actually start a fire, and there's like burning curtains in the background.
They can put it in one shot, okay?
Yeah, your campfire is your deal. I'm going to have one on screen. You can have whatever you want. Go on your s'mores, whatever. We're going to set our intentions for the weekend. Saturday night, we're going to have a slumber party.
Nice.
I have no idea what that's going to look like yet.
I thought the point of having something like this is to get out of your pajamas because you've been wearing them on a daily basis.
We could all have our drink. There were people who were drinking, for one thing.
Well, and that's what the daytime is for, not the drinking part, not the day drinking part, but the daytime. In the daytime, we're going to do what I call creative bubbles. And like in the morning, we're going to have 2 hours where we'll meet on Zoom for a few minutes. We'll do like a breathing practice or something to get us grounded and focused. And then you're on your own. You can go off. In advance, I'm talking about how do you create your space at home for yourself and how do you create boundaries for you and other people in your space, so that by the time you get to the retreat and you get to your creative bubble, you've got your space and you can sit and write whatever it is. And then we'll have lunch together. And then we'll go back and do another creative bubble. So And if you don't want to socialize with us, that's fine. You know, if you're like, oh my God, I finally am into the zone, you don't have to break for lunch. You can just keep going and just forget about us. Forget we're even there.
Right.
That's the idea. Yeah.
Well,
I just want to give a space to people and create a space where you can maybe get your mojo flowing and get motivated and some momentum happening.
Well, I think it's important. I mean, you know, here at that Nerd Show, we've tried a lot of different things to try to adjust. You know, again, really beta testing with Zoom and stuff. I mean, and because, you know, we're all gamers too. For anybody that's, when you watch this interview, yes, this is Donkey Kong in the background. This is how we work. You know, we were trying to do gaming tournaments, and how do you share screen and how do you do that? I mean, at one point, I've got a phone on a TV framed in, and you know, we kind of laughed that it was more fun trying to figure all of this out than the actual gaming. It was like, it's like a game within a game. But it kept people busy. It kept, you know, the conversations that you would have with people, or, oh, I have this idea for this. And then I kind of made this, I mentioned it earlier in our last interview, that for everybody that was dreading script readings, like they're going to rip me apart and criticize me and I can't handle this, now you're looking forward to them because you get to socialize with people.
Right. Yeah. Yeah.
But you know, it's like this weird consolation prize of just trying to survive everything. And you know, one day we're going to get back to somewhat of a normal society and like, oh yes, we can actually go out to happy hour and it's not on a video screen. So.
Yeah. And it'll be interesting to see, because I'm of the opinion that everything's not going to go back to the same as it was. It's going to be, it's going to be transformed into something new because we've had this experience, and things might be a little bit different afterwards just because. But so it'll be interesting to see what grows out of this, how our lives are changed or what blooms.
Right. Well, in messing around with Zoom, I mean, besides the creative retreat that you've got going on, has those wheels been turning in your head about how you can turn something into like a, you know, Zoom show, movie, or just anything? Have you played around with that over the last few months?
Yeah, you know, my problem is always I have too many ideas and I start to get a little crazy. So I'm like, how do I sort through all these ideas? Where do I put my energy for all these millions of ideas that are in my brain? So for a while, I was like, oh, okay. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to write a script, and it's going to be all done on Zoom, and I'm going to shoot the whole thing through Zoom, and it's going to be like, you know, we're going to go back and forth between cameras, and people are going to do their thing on there, and they're like, let somebody else do that, Jenni. Let somebody else do that. No. So that came up. My next, I've been thinking about what my second feature is going to be, and I do have a submission to Austin Film Society for a development grant right now that's pending. So hopefully, maybe I'll get some money to develop that. But
nice.
The next screenplay, you know, I'm thinking about how do I do that? It's going to have to be small. You know, fewer locations, fewer people, a small crew, because I don't think we're going to get to a place really quickly where I'm going to feel comfortable being on a big old set. I've been looking at all the COVID guidelines that the unions are coming out with, and like what they're saying to do, and it's just like, as an independent filmmaker, I don't know that we can afford to do all of that.
Right.
All the testing and all the PPE and all the zoning. So what does this next script look like? It's being defined a lot by like what will independent filmmaking look like?
Yeah. Well, you know, we talk about like revolutions, so to speak, or how things change in the film industry, and this is going to be a big one. This is going to be a big change in how people approach things and what they, you know, how they film, the stories they tell. I feel like there's going to be a lot more getting back to how you shoot, just having a conversation on a phone or FaceTiming people, because you can't have multiple people in proximity of one another.
Right.
But I'm interested to see the kind of stories that develop out of this.
Mm-hmm.
But, you know, also, how many streaming services do we have to launch now? I get we're all home, but, you know, as somebody that, as we pay for all these company accounts so we can review stuff, I'm like, I can't even keep up anymore.
Mm-hmm.
And I just,
that's interesting. Go ahead.
well, I was just saying, I saw that there was an article about Ryan Reynolds releasing another streaming service. I'm like, another one? Do I have to pay for this one?
Right. Right. And what do they all have on them that's different? What's on them that's the same? Yeah, it's really hard. And as a filmmaker trying to figure out where to take your stuff, it's
Right.
challenging.
Yeah.
Know what's going on.
I feel like eventually someone's going to say, I have a Zoom streaming services. I'll be live at a certain time. Please join me.
Right.
Right.
Well, I've been talking to a comedy group, and they were doing live shows, and now they've pivoted to do live online shows.
Right.
So we're talking about producing, you know, how do you produce online comedy? And that's been interesting to watch people trying to produce online comedy, like in their monologues. I love watching Stephen Colbert doing his masterful, like, pause. And then he goes on, you know, there's no laugh, there's nothing coming back at him. He's just like holding that energy on his own. And then we'll go to the next thing.
Right. And let me tell you, I love Bill Maher because he knows he's a comedian, and him doing New Rules without an audience is just weird.
Right.
So it's like,
Look at pipe in sound.
right. I mean, at least live sports is trying to pump in crowd music, even though you don't see people in the stands. So it's like, well, that's sort of, I mean, that sort of works, but not quite the same thing.
Cardboard cutouts are just very classy, of course.
See, and here's the thing. Speaking of film, this is where you know that society has turned weird. When every other cardboard cutout is Bernie from Weekend at Bernie's, and you're like, that guy seems familiar. It's like we can make those jokes now. So, but I want to actually talk about last year. We, you know, got to interview you over your film Stuck, and I know you were doing it without you going through the film festival circuit. What's going on with that film right now? I know, hopefully, there's been a lot more rentals on Amazon because people are stuck at home and have no excuse not to rent it. Just saying, people.
Yeah. So I am trying to let my baby go out into the world. Please, baby, go out in the world. I've been working on you for 20 years. It's time you're in college. Go get a job, right? And so my baby, my movie is on Prime and on Vimeo on demand. And also I put her up on Film Hub to see what happened there. But I'll talk about that in a second if you want to know more about that. Yeah. So the last year has really been about what do I do with this film? Like, we did not go to a lot of festivals. We did not get picked up by distributors or sales agents. We were not the indie darlings at Sundance. So what do you do now, right?
Right.
And so I became our salesperson and our distributor, basically, and put together some basic campaigns that would allow us to self-distribute on Prime, which I did, and then follow it up with some, you know, boosting some ratings and reviews on IMDb and Prime to get other people interested in it. So that happened in March-April-ish. We finally got admitted into the land of Prime. And that happened at the perfect time. I cannot tell you all the struggles that I had getting the film made and how long it took. It was like the universe knew exactly what it was doing.
Right.
I have a movie on a streaming platform that people are streaming. They're desperate to watch stuff right now.
Right.
It's called Stuck. People are stuck in their houses. My neighbor is one of those independent filmmakers who's got a lot more attention. He was about to do South by, which of course got canceled. He's got, an agent in New York. Well, his film is stuck on a shelf right now because they're trying to distribute it in the old-fashioned way.
Right.
And that is not, nobody's picking anything up right now for some reason, which makes no sense to me. But so it was very interesting to me to go, oh, by doing it this other way, by being a maverick, I actually think I had a lot more ability to get the film seen. And that's been my goal, is to have the film seen. So,
well,
yeah.
Well, we talk about like who's going to make out like a bandit during the pandemic, and there's two companies. First is Zoom, because everybody has to use it, and the second is going to be Amazon. And it is kind of a catch-22 in a lot of ways, but at the same time, you're glad to have Amazon with delivery and their Prime service, and when you're independent, to be able to showcase. I had this conversation with a fellow writer of mine, and I had a book come out at Christmas last year or December, and didn't really do a whole lot with it. I just, it's out there. I did a few little marketing things, talked to some book groups about it, and then I forgot about it because, this happened and we went on to other things. And I kept, and then saw all these great reviews on Amazon and forgot that people were viewing it. And it was like, oh yeah, I dropped it down to 99 cents on Kindle because people need to read. And then I started getting royalty checks. I'm like, why am I getting this $200? Where's this coming from? And I'm like, oh, because people are home and they, want to read, or whatever, they heard something, or so I've had other like fellow writers and even filmmakers. It's like, so we're not totally broke because people are looking for entertainment and they're discovering what we're doing and renting or buying a book or whatever. And this is coming through because, you can't go out to movie theaters. What are you going to do? And there's only so, and after the first month, when you've gone through the entire Disney Plus catalog, you got to move on to other things. So, but I think it adds an interesting dimension to, if you're independent and you're, like you've talked about being a maverick, how you have things like Amazon Prime and how you can get your stuff out there to audiences compared to people that are waiting on distribution or waiting to have their book released, or even music or whatever. You don't have to have that typical old-fashioned distribution anymore. You can throw it out there and people can find you. So
yeah, and I'm not making $1 million on it. Prime is paying a penny an hour right now for self-distributors, up to 10 cents if you've got a good customer engagement ranking. And I think last month we did. I was so proud of myself. In 1 month we had 300,000 minutes streamed, and I was like, oh my god. And I'm laughing at myself because like Disney has got like 3 million a minute streamed or whatever. But so yeah, my first royalty check was like 14 cents, which went toward that $50,000 that we put into the film. So making the money back penny by penny.
There you go. But does this whole experience, does it make you rethink how you approach distribution and making films in the future, especially after, the pandemic?
Well, yes, it does. One of the things that I had been wanting to do that I haven't gotten my head around yet is how to create a platform for female filmmakers. And now I'm seeing all these channels coming out, and I'm like, well, that's pretty much what I was thinking of a year or two ago, right? And create a studio that supported that platform. I don't know where that's going. Making movies, yeah, through this process, I did, even as an actor, I've never been the actor that is fit into the Hollywood box, I guess.
Right.
I've I've worked on with some amazing people. And my resume, like when you look at the people I've gotten to work with, that's pretty awesome. It's small, but like being in the big Hollywood box, it's not me. And I think what it did is it helped me confirm that. This whole process has helped me really confirm that for myself, so I don't have to try to do that anymore. I don't have to try to apply for the grant that is for the whatever, blah, 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 because I'm not going to get it, right? You know, I don't need to focus all my energy on trying to get into Sundance, because unless some angel comes in or something happens, I'm not going to get into Sundance. So I can now focus my energy in a different direction. And I think that's really important. I also really want to make positive films. I don't mean gushy-mushy stuff, but like films that can uplift and support you, even if they're edgy. I just think we need that right now.
Well,
yeah, I've been trying to watch shows, and there's so much stuff out there that just puts darkness and creepy stuff, and the world looks really scary when I'm watching all these shows.
Hey, why did we need 10 episodes in a Jeffrey Epstein documentary to tell us that he was creepy and wrong? I think 1 hour, I watched the 2020 special on Hulu in the middle of the night, and I'm like, that's all I needed. I didn't need 10 episodes.
You know, the first thing that popped into my head when I heard pandemic was there's a virus going around. I was like, oh my God, Walking Dead. I'm seeing The Walking Dead. The world has now turned into The Walking Dead for me. I was like, Jenny, stop. Stop. That's the power of media. Right.
I know. It's an influence. So speaking of films, we want to get this underneath the wire. Since the 25th anniversary is coming up next year, we have to talk about Bottle Rocket. We are big about anniversaries, 20, 25, 30 years, that kind of thing. And just in case we don't get a chance to really interview you in 2021 despite anything, I'm sure we will, but we actually wanted to talk about this. Like I said, this great independent film that launched careers, that was very small and had success, and that you were in. Is it hard to believe that it's been 25 years since that came out?
It is. I thought it had already been 25 years. So now I'm like, wait, it's 20. Oh, no, okay, it's 25 years. Yeah, it is.
Alex, I am correct. That's a 1996 film, right? Okay. I have to remember.
Maybe I was thinking of the 20-year anniversary. Like, wow. Wow, okay, yeah, 25 years is a long time. When I say I've been an actor, a professional actor for almost 30 years now, I'm like, what? Yeah, it's exciting. 25 years is a long time.
Right. But what was your favorite part of doing that movie, or your best experience?
Well, I don't know. I don't think I've told you the story about how I got in the movie. Have I told you the story?
I don't think so.
Okay. So this is kind of my favorite part. And this was one of my first auditions ever. And so I'm like a 19-year-old going out to my audition. And I saw the title Bottle Rocket. And during that time, they were doing kind of these big animated, real, I can't remember what those are called, but these kind of big films where the characters were really big and almost animated. And I was like, Bottle Rocket, and my boyfriend's name was Future Man. So I'm thinking this is like big, like the character needs to be big. So I go and I'm like, oh my God, you know, like my acting style is very big. And they look at me and they're like, okay, yes, thank you so much for coming in. I'm like, great, thank you. And eventually I got cast in the role. I get to the set, and I'm sitting down there, you know, with the Wilsons, and I'm like, you're really complicated. And Wes Anderson's like, could you bring that down just a little bit? You know, bring it down a little bit. So I was like, oh yeah, sure. So I got my acting lesson on set, which always happens to me. And I came to find out that I was in fact the third person they had selected for the role of Stacy Sinclair. I was not their first choice. I was their third choice. So, you know, the universe was smiling on me and knew what I needed. But yeah, that's probably my favorite thing is I was their third choice, but I got in that movie. The fun thing about that film, I remember getting on set. And so I have been watching the X-Files. This is during the land of X-Files. So, you know, the lights are coming down through the trees in the X-Files, right? And so I walk up on the set, that scene.
This hangs in my office. I'm just saying.
I'm a total nerd, man. I'm completely, oh my God. Okay. So I get on the set, and this scene was supposed to be shot at nighttime. So I'm walking up, and I've never been on a big set like this before, because even though it's a small film, it's a pretty big film. Like,
right.
We had all our own trailers, there were huge lights coming through the trees. Polly Platt was a producer on set with us. So I'm walking up, and the lights are coming down through the trees, just like on X-Files, because they're trying to light the house, you know. And I'm like, oh my God, and I have my own trailer. And then it starts raining. And it pours rain all night long. So I sit in there with the third Wilson brother, Andrew. He tears down the wall between our little, so when you're in a honey wagon, basically it's a trailer with separate little rooms, and there's little plywood between each room. So he pulls down the plywood between the rooms, between his little room and mine. We just sit there all night and chat, waiting for it to stop raining, and it never did. So we ended up shooting that at daytime. We had to come back and do it in the day.
Nice.
But yeah.
Alex, you and I have had conversations not only about Wes Anderson, but about this film over the years. What is the one thing that really stands out about Bottle Rocket for you? I mean, as the kind of, because you're our indie guy. You take on most of the really good like indie films and really look at everything. But again, what is kind of your favorite thing about this film?
You know, I think I like it's something I think I heard Martin Scorsese once say, because it was like one of his favorite movies. He went and saw it and he loved it. And I think when he was on with Roger Ebert at the end of like 99 or 2000, he listed it as like his favorite movie of the decade or something
Right.
like that. But I don't know if it was he who said this or somebody else, but I think it summed up the movie really well. And you have these characters who are the main characters, and there's nothing really great or exciting about them per se. They're just kind of average people. And it's kind of like these people who are like their accomplishment, like at the end, he says, "We did it, right? We did it." It's like, what did you do? You had an unsuccessful break-in at like a factory, like this is his accomplishment. So I like the fact that it's about people, I don't want to say losers, but it's people who haven't done anything rising to mediocrity, and to them, this is what success is. That's kind of how I heard somebody sum it up. So,
Right.
It's a movie that makes you feel good, because it's like you can relate to these people at the same time. It's like, hey, maybe it's not so bad, maybe life isn't so bad.
Right. Yeah, that's interesting. I always just found it that everybody, they're inept in their own ways, and they're okay with that. Like they've accepted it, and they're happy. Whether they realize what their own little bubble is, bubble. They're just fine with it. It's like, this is our life. We exist. We're okay with it. And you talk about the character you played, Jenni. This is someone, I look at that character, and if I saw her 25 years later, this is someone that probably never left the area, is okay with her little existence, or maybe she's married with kids or whatever, and probably sniping and gossiping on social media. Is happy doing that.
Absolutely. And
go ahead.
I think for me, it's one of his best films. I love Wes Anderson, but he got so strict in his art and in the telling the story through that. that it became much less I was much less able to emotionally connect with the characters. Whereas Bottle Rocket, it's like you said, Alex, like somehow I resonate with those characters. I know those guys. I know those guys.
And I kind of find it interesting because it is filmed here in Texas, and I feel like it's a very Texas story. That because you know all of these characters, and when you're a creative type, you never accept mediocrity. It's like you keep creating until you're happy, even if nobody else likes it. There's a point where it's never going to be right until you're satisfied with it. Okay, that you've put something down. And I look at some people that are not really creative, and they're just like, I'm happy with my existence. I've got my existence. I've got relatives like that. And as the creative type of my family, I'm just like, it's never going to be good enough because I have to have that power to be able to do it. So those people kind of annoy me. But at the same time, I'm also like, am I missing something here? How can I be happy with this mediocrity? Is this did you find out, the secret to life through this or whatever? I don't know, but it's a very heartwarming film. I want to touch on one more because I know we were talking about it last year. And while we're not trying to bring up nastiness or darkness or anything like that, you can go to Facebook for that. I do two things I want to touch on. I find it very interesting that this other film you were in, which is now 20 years old, Arlington Road.
Yeah.
I feel like that's how we are all now, looking at our neighbors, their political sign. If we're friends with them on Facebook, what are they, the crap that they're putting out there? And now we're all just overly suspicious. What should have been kind of a interesting cautionary tale has turned into real life. And we're just suspicious. And it's one of those films like I enjoyed it. It's a great film, great cast, but I can't go back and watch it because that's imitating life too much now.
Yeah.
So.
Yeah. Mark, I learned a lot from Mark Pellington. I had a role on that film that allowed me, I had to show up quite often, but I wasn't on camera a lot.
Right.
Which allowed me to sit and watch things happen. And that was, he would bring these art books to set of all the visions that he had of what this film was going to look like and how everything was going to look. And that completely informed the way I make movies too now. But yeah, that was a dark, dark vision. And it got, the cut that we all see is not the original cut. The original cut got cut down after a screening, I think in Germany. I don't remember, but that was a little too dark. It needed to be cut down. And so there's some things that have been cut out of there. Even.
Wow. Interesting.
Yeah.
Well,
yeah.
When you bring that up, it makes me think about, because I looked at the alternate ending, and it's so different from what they went with, and it kind of goes more into what the son is feeling, which I think was kind of an important element, perhaps. But and it's almost like he had some kind of understanding that maybe the grown-ups didn't have, and so I think there's kind of an important point to be made in that didn't necessarily get seen in the theatrical version, because there is sort of an innocence that kids have, where there's an honesty that they see that we don't see as adults because of what we've seen and experienced over the years.
Yeah. Interesting. Yeah. I don't know. There's just certain films I go back and watch that I acknowledge they're great, but with what we're living in, it imitates life way too much. I'm like, I can't put myself into that place.
Yeah.
But on the one hand, I'll say this about the X-Files, because I've literally made plenty of jokes. Anytime I hear like the K-On people, the Q people, and their conspiracy theories about cabals and deep state and everything, or the anti-vaccination people, or microchip, I literally just post a clip from the X-Files movie with Mark Lando talking about the new shadow government and how it's all going to happen. And I'm like, you are literally sounding like these people now. This is a fictional movie, and you've turned it into reality. And I'm just done. I'm just done. And I still watch the X-Files anyway because I'm a huge fan. But I'm like, that's how far we've gone now. That's just, it's become too real.
And sadly, you know, I was talking about The Walking Dead earlier, and we aren't in The Walking Dead per se, but The Walking Dead is really about humanity and how we treat each other and what makes us humans.
Right.
And we're definitely in that space right now of what makes us humans and how do we treat other humans
right
in this time. So it's interesting.
Well, and those same old themes keep coming back around that we see. You're always going to have those that want control over other people, and it's all about them, politicians, and people that are going to find a way to coexist and rebuild humanity and make the best of it. And sadly, I mean, you're right. Another show that I can't really go back and watch because I'm like, I just feel like you're imitating life too much, and I need to be in a happy place. So I wanted to ask you this again. Some of the questions that we never got a chance to do in a 4-minute interview on a red carpet, and we've talked about
talking with all the people screaming and talking, and what are you talking about?
I know.
I can't really hear you.
I know. When it comes to films, I mean, you talk about your experiences and what you've learned on your past films, but what films inspired you to be a filmmaker?
You know, I know what films inspired Stuck. So maybe those are the films that inspired me to be a filmmaker. But I don't know what when I was a little kid, I would get in bed and the lights would go out and I would lay there and I would start directing a story in my head. And I didn't really get that that's what I do now. So something in me had already wanted to start directing. I wanted to direct everybody, I guess. Here, let me tell the story the way I want to tell it. But
Fair enough.
I also love to go and sit in the theater. When I'm really down or having a hard time, if I go and sit in a theater when the lights go down, there's something magical that happens, and there's something that connects me to something bigger. I don't know why. And then the images come up on the screen and the sound comes up, and I'm like enveloped in this story. And I get to be enveloped in it visually and through my ears. And even, you know, in a movie where there's thunder or big sounds, it's shaking me. It's, you know, it's a visceral experience. And that is what I love about movies. And that's why I think I keep going back to making movies instead of the other things that I do too. Inspired, like when I was 7, I went to see Star Wars with my bop-bop. That was one of the first movies I ever saw.
I was going to say, Star Wars is always a go-to answer.
Star Wars, you know, we were playing with our Star Wars toys and trading our baseball cards and our Star Wars cards when I was little. As I got older, it started to be more the darker people. I was really into, you know, Chris Nolan, Memento. That was a big,
Right.
And that was, you know, Stuck is about memory. Adam Egoyan, Sweet Hereafter, man, wow. Okay, let's go there. Since female Susanne Bier, she's Danish. She
Right.
made these beautiful films. After the Wedding, which I think they've remade like 3 of her films now in America. It's just completely things we lost in the fire. Brothers, no, they've killed it, but the originals were beautiful.
Right.
And Philadelphia Story. Don't ask me why. Love that film.
Well, first of all, besides it having Cary Grant and you know, the great play between Katharine Hepburn and Cary Grant. I love Jimmy Stewart kind of being the straight man in there, and Jimmy Stewart is, to me, as what Tom Hanks was before we knew who Tom Hanks was, and it's kind of hard to imagine him being that, curmudgeon or whatever, because we imagine him in It's a Wonderful Life, but you have all these great characters. So no, I get what you're saying about the Philadelphia story, and I once dated a woman who didn't really like classic film and just I won't do anything in black and white, and I'm like, if you can't appreciate movies like this, we're just not going to work. I'm sorry. I mean, we can make
Right.
out. It's not going to work out.
Clue. Okay, so when I got to watch Clue, it was on one of these discs. It wasn't a CD. It was this disc that was like this big, and you'd feed it into the machine.
Ooh, the laser disc.
It wasn't even a laser disc because it was some other even like weird thing. My dad always ended up with the weirdest thing, like the weirdest piece of technology. And the alternate endings. Oh my God.
We talk about women filmmakers, and I know you mentioned one earlier. But what other women filmmakers have inspired you in your
Jane
journey?
Campion. Yeah, Jane Campion's Piano. That was a big one. And then Strange Days.
Very
Can't think of her
underrated.
name.
Alex, we got to go to you on this one. I'm drawing a blank too. Do you remember the director of Strange Days?
It's Point Break. She's Point Break lady.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I don't know. Okay.
It was a Catherine Bigelow. Okay, right. I actually had forgotten that. I was thinking somebody else. But yeah, that was the one that she did a few years after Point Break. And that's another one we were talking about. It's like, if you think that women filmmakers can't make great action films with a great narrative, then you're just a moron. First of all, Point Break is awesome. Okay. And we're talking about the original one, not the crappy remake they made. But Strange Days.
She created that camera work, that's a special whatever camera thingamabobber to make that film work.
Yeah. So, I mean, and Strange Days is one of those very underrated films that I don't think anybody truly appreciates, which is actually, this year is the 25th anniversary. That was came out in 95. And it's one of those movies that American audiences didn't really know who Ralph Fiennes was, because he hadn't done the English yet, and it hadn't won Oscars and all that. So it's kind of that great little gritty sci-fi futuristic movie that sneaks in there. It's like, wow, this really is good. So interesting.
Darren Aronofsky, I hated Pie, but I totally understood it. And why did I hate it? Because I had a headache. Why did I have a headache? Because the guy made the movie so well that I had a headache, because the guy in the movie is like giving himself a lobotomy, right? Requiem for a Dream, those movies. And then Terrence Malick's New World was a big one for me too.
That's actually my favorite of his films. Now, I didn't make this press screening, but Alex did. The Knight of Cups one. Then that's the one you went to where people walked out. It was really kind of like not what you expected, right, Alex?
When was this?
Knight of Cups was a few years ago.
Yeah, that didn't go over too well. Yeah. Yeah.
I tried to watch that online, and I had a hard time with it.
Yeah.
Tried to do too much, I think. It was too complicated.
I mean, every filmmaker kind of has a miss here and there where you think you have the best of intentions and it just doesn't really work out. But New World is, from the cinematography to the use of great classical music, I mean, it's such a beautiful, beautiful film. Yes, absolutely on that one.
But you'll see now I'm going back to guys. You asked me about women, and I've gone back to guys.
Well, we start off with women because, I mean, when it comes to women filmmakers, it's easy to say guys because of what this industry is. And we're not taking away from great, men filmmakers, but at the same time, we need to acknowledge that there are great women filmmakers out there. and stuff. One thing that I would actually like to point out, and I believe it's on Netflix right now. We did an early press screening of it. One of the great few documentaries that we enjoyed and got to talk about, but it was the Hedy Lamarr documentary that came out a couple of years ago about her career, how she came to the U.S., and also who invented radar. You know, so groundbreaking at the time. Also is credited with the first nude scene in a silent film, you know, very European. But she was a remarkable woman and, you know, hard to handle and just kind of broke that mold, you know, in Hollywood. So now here's our nerdy question. We've kind of reshaped our nerdy question for you. You know, I wanted to give it to you ahead of time so you could think about it. If you, as a filmmaker, as a creator, you created your own female superhero, what would you create? From the backstory to the superpowers they would have to the personality that they would have. What would be your ideal female superhero?
Okay. So I've got part of it down. Okay.
You took notes, didn't you? You wrote out notes. I know.
Now I've got it on my computer. No, okay. So as I was showering, I was talking to myself in the cab. So her superpower is that she has like laser beams of love, and so she can look at you, she can be around her, and all of a sudden you're going to feel loved.
Nice.
Why is that a superpower? Because what that does is if you feel loved, then you feel safe and you feel worthy, which activates all of your superpowers. So that's what I'm loving about this. Yeah. And then like if she turns her laser beams of love onto the bad guys, they can't stay bad guys because they're like loving themselves.
See, because like, I'm imagining the scene between two guys who are about to fight, and now that you know, now they have love. Dude, I love you, bro. Let's go have a beer and watch the game together. Oh, did we lose
right.
for a moment?
Just
yeah,
the
just a second.
picture.
I'm coming back.
Oh.
Sorry. I had a notification pop up, and I'm like trying to get rid of it, and you know. Okay. Okay.
I like that.
So we've got our laser beams of love is her superpower. Now, her personality type, you know, she's really nice. She's compassionate, but she doesn't take any shit, right? She's got some good boundaries. But she does have her kryptonite is she has one bad relationship after another with men who do not value her, that she cannot affect with her superpowers.
Ooh. Wow.
And yeah.
I think you've pretty much just written that there's no way about it. Just can't escape bad relationships. Everybody has them.
And she also tends to, until she learns how to use her superpowers well, she gives too much of her love. So she constantly struggles with her self-esteem, and she's constantly burnt out. Yeah. So that's her. I don't know about her backstory and her name. I think we're gonna have like a contest for what her name would be.
Come up with a name? Yeah. See.
Yeah.
Well, I kind of we framed this question because this is something else that we were talking about not too long ago. Years ago, we did this thing called Superhero Week, and everybody on our staff had to create a superhero. You had to create a backstory, you know, do an outline, and then we did a podcast and talked about it. You know, we know the big ones, and of course Marvel, DC, and all that, but there's so many great little independent superheroes. How do you get it from point A to point B? It isn't just about creating a name and a few powers. There has to be a backstory. There has to be something that drives these characters. You know, or as we like to put it, this is your chance to be Stan Lee. You know, how would you do it? But and I think a lot of where they come from determines who they, you know, become. I think it's very interesting that Superman comes from Kansas, and they even make jokes about in the last Superman movie that that's about as American as you can get. You know, it's Midwest. They have values. He grows up with a family that teaches him values that helps determine whether he's going to be good or bad, whether he's going to help the world or rule the world. I think it's interesting that Wonder Woman comes from a mysterious land where women are warriors and don't need men and stuff like that, and she applies that in how she deals with the men in her life, especially, you know, with the Justice League. And Batman being this character that comes from a very, you know, metropolitan area, dark and gritty like Chicago or New York, and, you know, you're a part of this society, the rich society, but at the same time, you know, you are the Dark Knight. So I think places that you come from really do help shape who you are. And it's interesting if you look at the regions where characters are born in and stuff. And that's another, we've had these conversations before at that nerd show. You know, it's all about developing lore and stuff. And you have to think about how does that develop the character where they're really from. And the places that they're from really are the side characters. Side game. So interesting thing to, you know, think about and stuff. But yeah, I like the idea of the having a contest to develop the name. You know, also it gives you an idea for another writing project, whether it's film, graphic novel, whatever, just to add to your creative play.
Yes. Now I'm thinking. Oh my goodness.
So
We're not of a help book. Go ahead.
Well, the last question we wanted to ask, and it's kind of something, again, that we've all been talking about, is we are surviving the pandemic, and we've all been watching a lot more Netflix and Amazon Prime and everything we probably, you know, more than we normally would. What has been the best show that you have discovered on any streaming channel that isn't dark, but something that is positive and just has entertained you? Something you can recommend to our audience. And X-Files is always a go-to answer.
So I just discovered Making It.
Nice, okay.
Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman are having, you know, a competition of people making stuff in a barn. It's like the British baking show. I love it. So people are being creative and they're making stuff, and Amy Poehler and Nick Offerman are just being goofballs, you know, and making fun of kind of the format. And they don't want anybody to have to go home. They end the show with the people who have to go home, sitting with them and playing music and making a song about it. It's just like, so that would be my light. That would be my light fun thing right now. Yeah.
That's a great show. And my theory about that show is Nick Offerman was bored and just wanted to invite people over to a barn. It was like, put a camera on, this is what we'll do. And I'm a huge fan. Yeah. And I am a huge fan of Nick Offerman. I mean, Ron Swanson is one of the greatest characters ever created.
Yes, and I don't tend to watch whole series of anything over and over again, but I think I've watched Parks and Rec 3 times now, all the way through.
Yes.
So if you talk about female people who are influencing me right now, it'd be Amy Poehler and Tina Fey. Yeah. Two of the best that are out there. And speaking of Tina Fey, that was a good time to actually go back and watch 30 Rock and just how brilliant that show was. Gives me a whole new love for Alec Baldwin. We all have our own shows. I'll name mine in a moment, but Alex, besides the stuff that we're reviewing, what have you discovered here lately on streaming services that you've enjoyed, or even something you've gone back to?
I did actually go back and rewatch Parks and Rec myself recently. It wasn't streaming because I actually had it on DVD, so I did it the old-fashioned way. But the only
Old
difference,
school of you.
the only
Classic
difference,
nerd.
only difference for me is that I have a tendency to stop before I get through the end of the final season because I don't want to get to the end. So I think the last couple of times I watched it, I actually stopped in the middle of the last season. But
Right.
that's one I like to rewatch because I don't always remember when things happened. That then you kind of like, oh yeah, I remember that. That was good. I liked that. And yeah, so I'm kind of with Jenny on that one, I guess.
Well, this is my recommendation, and I've turned so many people onto this show, especially this year. It has to do with a tradition of mine. I am a huge West Wing fan. Love Aaron Sorkin. We all wish we could write dialogue like Aaron Sorkin. But I binge watch The West Wing every 2 years, every election cycle, because it's about the only thing that can really make me feel good about politics. And I'm like, why can't it just be this? Why can't we just have a president like Josiah Bartlet? Please. And it's so brilliantly written. I think the issues that they deal with throughout 7 seasons are still applied today. And so I've told a lot of people about this show that haven't done it. It's on Netflix now. And like, look, just start about the time the primaries are starting, binge watch. And if you do what I do, you start season 7 during an election year. And on the day of the election, you watch like the last 6 episodes as we, are closing in on the polls and finding out who won what. But with all the nastiness that's out there and nobody agreeing and everything, I think it's about the only thing that will make you feel good about politics. Besides Park and Recreation, I also think if Leslie Knope just ran everything with her color-coded notebook, the world would be fine. But yeah, start watching The West Wing because it never gets old. Great cast, and you have so many great female characters that were very well written, from C.J. Craig, and I love Allison Janney anyway. And my friend Mary always says, she's like, I'm trying to be more like Donna every day and just keep things straight. But yeah, so that's my recommendation. Tired of politics? Watch The West Wing. Also, if you're like me, you have your Bartlett for America t-shirt, and that's what you wear on election day. You're probably never going to find anybody better. So, but anyway, Jenny, thank you very much for hanging out with us today in this interview and talking about filmmaking during a pandemic, being creative, recommendations for TV shows, and stuff. It's always great having you and stuff like that. And good luck with what you're doing and your creative retreat next week. We look forward to having you again sometime.
Yes. Thank you so much. I've been so excited to do this today. It was just a really wonderful gift for my day. So thank you guys, and I hope you have a beautiful one.